Nathan Sterling moved through the bustling headquarters of Sterling Innovations with the calculated grace of a maestro conducting a symphony. The towering glass walls reflected the early morning sunlight, casting geometric patterns on the marble floors. Each step he took was deliberate, every handshake and nod laden with purpose. Nathan wasn't just the CEO, he was the cornerstone of a tech empire that had reshaped industries. From revolutionary software to cutting-edge hardware solutions, his name was synonymous with brilliance and precision. At 42, Nathan had reached heights most only dreamed of. His calendar was filled with speaking engagements at global conferences, board meetings with Fortune 500 leaders, and strategy sessions that defined the future of technology. He thrived in the high-stakes arena of innovation, where milliseconds mattered, and risks were rewarded in billions. Yet, for all his professional prowess, it was his personal life that completed the picture of success. His wife Miranda was his perfect complement, a striking beauty with a sharp intellect, known for her elegance and poise at charity galas and corporate events. This evening, the Sterling Mansion, a modern architectural marvel perched atop the city's skyline, was a beacon of celebration. The billion-dollar merger Nathan had orchestrated with unrivaled precision was the talk of the industry. Guests arrived in sleek black cars, the glow of city lights reflecting off polished chrome as valet attendants ushered them into the sprawling estate. The mansion's glass walls revealed an interior alive with laughter, clinking glasses, and murmured conversations. Inside, Nathan moved effortlessly through the crowd, a glass of champagne in hand. The room was a who's who of industry titans, tech moguls, venture capitalists, and a smattering of celebrities drawn to the glamour of Silicon Valley's elite. His younger brother Andrew had flown in from Europe, where he managed Sterling Innovations' overseas operations. Andrew's easy charm and quick wit often complemented Nathan's more reserved demeanor. Nearby, Miranda shone brightly, her deep crimson dress catching the light as she laughed at something Celeste, her best friend, had said. Celeste, with her razor-sharp wit and knack for commanding attention, was a social fixture in their circle. As Nathan raised his glass to toast the merger, a hush fell over the room. "To new beginnings and limitless horizons," he began, his voice resonant and steady. "Sterling Innovations has always been about pushing boundaries, and tonight we celebrate not just a merger but a shared vision for the future." The crowd erupted in applause, a wave of admiration washing over him. Nathan's eyes roved the room, soaking in the moment, but amidst the sea of smiles, his gaze snagged on a subtle but unmistakable exchange. Andrew and Miranda. It was a fleeting glance, the kind that might go unnoticed by most. Yet to Nathan, whose analytical mind was trained to detect even the smallest anomalies, it lingered like an unspoken question. Miranda's laugh came a beat too late, her eyes darting to meet Andrew's before quickly looking away. Andrew, usually so composed, seemed to stiffen, his hand gripping the stem of his wineglass just a bit too tightly. The moment passed, the two of them resuming their conversations as if nothing had happened. But Nathan felt it, a shift, an undercurrent of something unsaid. Later that night, as the party wound down and the last of the guests departed, Nathan stood alone on the terrace, the city spread out like a glittering sea before him. He replayed the moment in his mind, dissecting every detail. It was nothing, he told himself, a trick of the light perhaps. Yet the doubt had taken root. Nathan Sterling, a man who had built his empire by trusting data and instinct, felt a crack in his otherwise unshakable confidence. Success had brought him everything: power, prestige, and the illusion of control. But as the cool night breeze brushed against his face, Nathan couldn't shake the sense that the carefully constructed symphony of his life had hit its first discordant note. Nathan Sterling had always trusted his instincts. Those instincts, sharp and unerring in business, had propelled him to the top of his field. Yet now they whispered a disquieting refrain. As he sipped his morning espresso in his sunlit kitchen, the memory of that fleeting glance between Miranda and Andrew replayed in his mind, refusing to fade. Nathan pushed the thought aside, distracting himself with his tablet as he reviewed the company's latest metrics. Sterling Innovations was thriving, but for the first time in years his focus wavered. Miranda walked in, dressed for one of her so-called mental health days. Clad in sleek athletic wear, she leaned in to kiss his cheek, her freshly applied perfume lingering a moment too long. "I'm heading out for a ride," she said brightly, slipping her phone into the pocket of her jacket. "Don't wait up for me. Might take the scenic route." Nathan smiled, but his mind lingered on how often she'd been taking these rides lately. A few months ago, Miranda's cycling hobby had seemed harmless, even admirable. Now, it felt like a piece of a puzzle he wasn't ready to assemble. His thoughts turned to Andrew, who had left abruptly the morning after the party, citing urgent business in Europe. It wasn't unusual for Andrew to jet across the globe at a moment's notice. Sterling Innovations' European branch often required hands-on leadership, but something about his demeanor had been off. He'd been avoiding direct eye contact, and his typical charm had felt strained. Nathan's analytical mind wouldn't let go. That evening he sat in his study, the faint glow of the city skyline filtering through the windows. He called up Sterling Innovations' internal audits, a habit he relied on to ground himself. At first everything seemed in order, but then a discrepancy caught his eye. A series of uncharacteristically large transfers from the European division's discretionary budget. Nathan frowned. The funds had been funneled into accounts linked to obscure entities, shell companies by the look of it. He leaned back in his chair, the pieces starting to align in a disturbing pattern. Nathan had built his empire by trusting evidence over assumption, so he flagged the accounts and sent them to his CFO for deeper investigation. He had a sinking feeling about what they might find. The following morning, Nathan decided to follow Miranda during her ride. It wasn't an act of paranoia, he told himself, but of prudence. Using a GPS tracker he'd installed on her bike months earlier as a safety precaution, he watched her progress along the usual trail, but halfway through she veered off, heading toward a secluded park on the edge of the city. There, as Nathan watched from the privacy of his Tesla, Andrew appeared. The park was nearly empty, their laughter carrying faintly through the air. Miranda reached out, lightly touching Andrew's arm as they dismounted their bikes. Nathan's pulse quickened. It wasn't just the physical closeness, it was the comfort between them, the way their movements synced like a practiced dance. Nathan snapped photos with his phone, his hand steady despite the storm raging within. This was no ordinary sibling-in-law camaraderie. As he watched them disappear down a wooded path, the weight of betrayal began to press against his chest. But Nathan's discoveries weren't confined to the personal. That evening, his CFO called to confirm his suspicions. The shell companies tied to the European division were connected to a network of investors Miranda was linked to through her friend Celeste. The transactions formed a paper trail that implicated both Andrew and Miranda in what appeared to be an elaborate scheme siphoning funds from the company. Nathan set his phone down carefully, staring out into the night. His life, meticulously crafted to perfection, was beginning to splinter. Miranda's laughter, Andrew's avoidance, and the financial discrepancies weren't isolated incidents. They were threads of the same web. And Nathan, the man who prided himself on anticipating every move, had been ensnared. But as the initial shock ebbed, his resolve hardened. Nathan Sterling wasn't a man who folded under pressure. If they thought he would crumble, they didn't know him at all. Nathan spent days planning his next move. His emotions, once raw and unruly, were now locked away behind the cold logic that had always served him well in business. He knew that confronting both Miranda and Andrew would require precision, much like dismantling a ticking time bomb. Every word, every gesture had to be calculated. He invited them to dinner under the pretense of celebrating Andrew's brief return and their shared success. The setting was deliberate, intimate, controlled, and impossible to escape. The dining room shimmered with unstated elegance. The soft glow of the chandelier bathed the table in golden light, its warmth at odds with the storm brewing beneath Nathan's calm exterior. Miranda arrived first, radiant in a silk blouse, her laughter light as she complimented the wine selection. Andrew followed minutes later, his casual demeanor betrayed by the faint tension in his jaw. Nathan noted it all. Miranda's subtle glances at Andrew, the the way his brother avoided eye contact. Conversation flowed easily at first, a dance of pleasantries and updates on their respective ventures. Nathan waited, biding his time, allowing the trap to close gradually. Then, midway through the second course, he struck. "So, Andrew," Nathan began, setting his wine glass down with deliberate precision, "how's the European division holding up? Any surprises in the pipeline?" Andrew hesitated, his fork hovering mid-air. "Everything's fine," he replied, his voice steady but lacking its usual confidence. "The merger has kept us busy, but we're on track." Nathan tilted his head, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Ah, interesting. I've been reviewing the accounts. There seem to be some irregularities, funds moving through unfamiliar channels." The room seemed to contract, the air thick with tension. Miranda's hand, which had been reaching for her glass, froze mid-motion. Andrew's knuckles whitened around his fork. "Irregularities?" Andrew said, his voice pitched higher than usual. "I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. I can look into it." Nathan leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "A misunderstanding, perhaps. Though I find it curious that these misunderstandings lead to accounts tied to companies in Miranda's social circle." Miranda's gasp was audible. "Nathan, this is ridiculous. What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything, Miranda. I'm stating facts," Nathan said, his voice razor-sharp. "Andrew has been siphoning money from the company, and you've been complicit." Andrew began to protest, but Nathan silenced him with a look colder than the wine chilling in their glasses. "Save it. I've seen the accounts, the transactions, the connections. Did you think I wouldn't notice? That I'd just write off millions as a rounding error?" Miranda's face paled, her polished facade cracking. "Nathan, you're overreacting. This isn't what it looks like." "Enough." Nathan's voice cut through the room like steel. "You betrayed me, both of you. You thought you could steal from me, tarnish what I've built, and walk away unscathed." Andrew tried to stammer out an excuse, but Nathan was already rising. "Dinner's over," he said, his voice low and final. "You'll hear from my lawyers." The weight of his words hung in the air as he left the table, the first act of his retaliation complete. Behind him, the sound of Miranda's sobs and Andrew's frantic whispering only confirmed what he already knew. They weren't ready for what was coming. Nathan Sterling's mind was a battlefield. In the days following the confrontation, he channeled every ounce of his rage, betrayal, and pain into precise, methodical action. If Miranda and Andrew had underestimated him, they were about to learn the true scope of his capabilities. Sterling Innovations was more than a tech company. It was an extension of Nathan himself, and he would not let it crumble. The first step was gathering evidence. Nathan spent countless nights in his private study, combing through encrypted files, call logs, and financial records. With the help of his top-tier cybersecurity team, under the guise of auditing the European division, he unearthed every detail of Andrew's embezzlement and Miranda's role in facilitating it. Emails, text messages, and even private meetings were traced and documented. Nathan was relentless, knowing that this would not just be a personal reckoning, but a public dismantling of their deceit. Once he had the evidence, Nathan turned to his lawyers. His legal team, accustomed to navigating corporate mergers and intellectual property disputes, now found themselves preparing for a different kind of battle. They crafted airtight cases, one for Sterling Innovations' board of directors and another for the divorce proceedings that Nathan knew were inevitable. His instructions were clear: no compromises, no settlements. Meanwhile, Nathan prepared to weaponize the very tools Miranda and Andrew had used against him. The shell companies siphoning money from the European division were traced back to a network of dubious investors linked to Miranda's social circle. Nathan decided to expose them. Working discreetly, he leaked carefully chosen pieces of information to financial regulators and investigative journalists, ensuring the exposure would ripple far beyond Miranda and Andrew. The fallout would engulf everyone involved in their scheme. Next came the shareholder meeting. Nathan orchestrated the event with the same precision he applied to his business ventures. It was held in the company's state-of-the-art auditorium, where the walls were lined with sleek monitors ready to display his findings. The attendees and showholders, executives, and members of the media arrived expecting updates on the merger. Instead, they witnessed the unveiling of Andrew's betrayal. Nathan stood at the podium, his calm exterior masking the storm within. He presented the evidence methodically, his voice unwavering as he outlined how Andrew had exploited his position to embezzle millions. Every claim was backed by documentation, every accusation delivered with an unflinching gaze. Gasps rippled through the room as Nathan revealed the extent of the fraud and the involvement of Miranda, a trusted figure in his personal and professional life. By the time Nathan concluded, the room was silent. Andrew's resignation was immediate and public. His face paled as he left under the watchful eyes of the media. Miranda, though not present, could not escape the fallout. Her social circle, once her sanctuary, turned cold as her complicity was exposed. In a masterstroke, Nathan announced a new partnership with a rival firm, a deal Andrew had unknowingly tried to sabotage. The merger went ahead without a hitch, solidifying Sterling Innovations' position at the pinnacle of the tech world. The public hailed Nathan as a visionary leader who overcame betrayal with dignity and determination. But Nathan didn't celebrate. As he watched the news coverage of his triumph from his penthouse that night, the victory felt strangely hollow. The empire was safe, his enemies defeated, yet the cost had been steep. The scars of betrayal would remain, even as he stood unshaken atop the ruins of those who tried to destroy him. The days following the shareholder meeting were marked by a quiet intensity. Sterling Innovations thrived under the strategic alliance Nathan had forged, but in the stillness of his penthouse, a different battle played out in his mind. Victory should have felt satisfying, even cathartic, yet Nathan Sterling, the man who had always controlled his destiny, now grappled with the ache of betrayal and the realization that his meticulously curated life had been a facade. One evening, as Nathan reviewed the final legal proceedings against Andrew, he received an unexpected call. It was Celeste. Her voice, usually sharp and confident, now wavered. "Nathan, we need to talk," she said, her tone carrying an urgency that cut through his weariness. "Nathan!" They met at a discreet cafe away from prying eyes. Celeste sat across from him, her fingers tapping nervously against the table. "You were right about Miranda," she began, avoiding his gaze. "But there's more. Something I think you deserve to know." Nathan leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Go on." Celeste hesitated before confessing. Miranda wasn't just complicit in Andrew's scheme. She was the architect of it. She planned everything. Introducing Andrew to the investors, leveraging my connections to create those shell companies. It wasn't just about money, Nathan. She wanted to dismantle you. To prove she could outsmart you. Nathan's chest tightened, but he didn't interrupt. Celeste continued, her voice tinged with regret. "I should have seen it sooner, but Miranda had a way of making you believe she was on your side. And Andrew, he was just her pawn." Nathan's mind raced as Celeste revealed more. Miranda's betrayal ran deeper than he had imagined. She hadn't planned to build a new life with Andrew. He was merely a convenient tool. Her real goal was to take the stolen money and leave everyone behind, vanishing into a world she had secretly constructed. It was a revelation that left Nathan cold. "Tell me this now," he asked, his tone measured. "Because I was part of it," Celeste admitted, her eyes brimming with guilt. "I didn't realize how far she'd go until it was too late. I thought I was helping a friend, but you were never supposed to find out like this, and I couldn't live with myself if I didn't come clean." Nathan's initial reaction was anger, but as he studied Celeste's anguished expression, a strange calm overtook him. He realized that this final truth was the closure he hadn't known he needed. Miranda's betrayal wasn't just a personal affront, it was an attack on the very foundation of his life. That night, Nathan stood alone on his penthouse balcony, the city below a mosaic of lights and shadows. The skyline, once a symbol of his achievements, now seemed distant. Miranda and Andrew were gone from his life, their plans unraveled. Sterling Innovations had emerged unscathed, stronger even, but the scars of deception remained. For the first time in years, Nathan allowed himself to reflect, not on his empire, but on his own vulnerability. His fortress of control had been breached, not by competitors or rivals, but by the people he trusted most. And while he had emerged victorious, the battle had left an indelible mark. In the quiet of the night, Nathan resolved to move forward, not just as a leader, but as a man who had learned the weight of trust and the cost of betrayal. Miranda's absence was a reminder of what he had lost, but also of what he still had: his integrity, his resilience, and the unyielding drive that had defined his life. As the wind swept through the balcony, Nathan turned and walked inside, leaving the cityscape behind. The past was a lesson, not a prison, and though the scars would linger, they were a testament to his survival. No one would ever outmaneuver Nathan Sterling again.